Okay, so I wanted to get started asking about how you became involved in the film. What was it about the script that you really liked, and how did you become attached to direct the film?
Yeah, so I met Leah Johnson, one of the producers at we were both in a comedy talent lab incubator through the Canadian Film Center and with different projects. And so we met during that and got on really, really well. And so sometime later, we just kept in touch over the years. She had been working on this script, at which point was called Killing Daniel. So the title changed a few times over its history.
Mhm.
Um, and so she sent it over to me thinking that I might be a good fit for it as in terms of being a director. And I read it and what I think I responded to was I'd always wanted to make like a film about a dysfunctional family because I think like many people, I come from one. A loving dysfunctional family. But I never gotten around to writing it for myself. And so when I read it, it just felt like, oh, this is like I went to bed with an idea and woke up and the shoe elves had made the script for me. So I liked what I liked a lot about it was without giving, I don't want to give away any spoilers or ending, but I liked what it said about the nature of family. Because I think it's different than I had ever seen in a film before. It had a slightly different tweak on the typical commentary on complicated family relationships that really responded to me at the time.
And once production began on the film, how did you approach directing? What was your really style like on set and really making the film?
Oh, I'm just a hard ass, just really brutal with it. No, um, it's interesting because originally the film was written to take place in like in northern Ontario in the woods, right? In like a big family mansion in the woods. And then COVID happened, and we thought the film was kind of dead for a long time. And then Leah and Nicholas called me, the producers, and they're like, "Hey, so actually, we think we have an opportunity to make the film during COVID." And I was like, "I don't know how that's going to happen, but sure." And they mentioned they had figured out a way to make movies in the Cayman Islands. And could the writer and I update the script so it could take place at a tropical island, which makes way more sense for the story being about like a family that's just ridiculously wealthy. Um, so shooting there was interesting because they don't make films in the Cayman Islands, right? It's not one of the things they do. Not used to crews coming in and renting their locations and all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting, but it was really kind of cool as well because all of us went down there, the cast and the crew. And so it was kind of like going away to camp because we didn't have our friends, we didn't have our family, we just had each other. And so, like, on the weekends and evenings when we weren't shooting or in prep, we'd just go on stinky adventures with each other and we'd go out for dinner and, play volleyball on the beach. And so it was a really fun, great experience in that sense, challenging from a production point of view because you don't have a lot of the stuff you're used to having being in a country that doesn't have film stuff, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag in that like in terms of just like the experience with people, really really lovely. Making the film probably the most challenging experience I'd had, just because of those limitations.
Yeah. And speaking about the location, that was something that I was actually about to ask as well. And while I was watching the film, I really liked the settings that you had, and what was it like also creating the look for the locations and really being on that particular set and really creating for the.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges we had too was we were 2 days away from shooting and we still didn't have the house. So that was the big thing because for me, it was the house was so much a character in the film because so much of the film takes place there, and also the comings and goings of where everyone is. And I think also some of the stuff that was written in the script for the house uh just didn't exist in the Cayman Islands. Like there was supposed to be a giant plot point around a hole being dug and what happened in that hole. You can't dig a hole in the Cayman Islands because it's all bedrock. So we had to like rewrite the script for that. We had to rewrite the script for other things in houses. But my approach, once we found the house that we could work well enough that people were like allowing us to shoot in, I had always kind of seen this as a modern day Hitchcock kind of film. I thought there was a lot of fun little winks and nods we could have within that. It's a comedy first and foremost. So, you never wanted to get too macabre, I think is the word. Sorry. You never want to get too macabre. So the balancing act for me, it was like, well, how do we like infuse some style into this thing and give it a vibe without stamping on the comedy too much? And so that's kind of the line I tried to dance. Hopefully I was successful.
Yeah, and the comedy was also something that I enjoyed as well, and I wanted to ask about that experience and working with the cast on the comedy elements in particular, and what that experience was like in really creating the humor.
Yeah, I mean, really, the trick to comedy, in my experience, is casting well. If you get the right actors in there, they're just going to lift the material and make it their own to some extent, but also just find ways to bounce off of each other. And then also casting the right chemistry of actors, right? And if you get that wrong, it doesn't matter how good the script is. It doesn't matter anything. It's probably not going to work to its optimum. So I think we got lucky with a lot of the cast that we got and just how willing they were to play. I was really lucky, not lucky, and I was unfortunate, I should say, actually, that I'm the last director that got to work with Bob before he passed away so suddenly. I just spoken to him 2 days earlier before he passed away. And it was such a strange, tragic thing that occurred. But he was, Bob was one of my childhood idols. I grew up watching him, and then his stand up when I was a teenager, and getting a sense of who he really was and his voice in comedy. And so when we cast him, just like anytime I've worked with, someone who has been an idol of mine, someone I really respect, I always find within 3 seconds of talking to them, they instantly just put you at ease. They know how to be superstars, and just get down to the work and let you know that they're just a human being as well. So, the conversations I'd have with him were probably not much different than I've had it with most actors, where it was really just about the work and like, how do we push this further? What can we discover about this character, and how can we highlight that and what's already there?
Once the actors signed on to star in the film, what was it like overall as well to really create the characters with them and really maybe rehearse and really get to speak with them about the story as well?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you a different story about every single actor on this film. My first question I always ask an actor once we've cast them is, what do you want to do with the part? Because I think the best performances are ones that come from within, as opposed to an actor having to like pretend to be a character or like fit the character into who they are. I always find it's much better to like just get to know an actor and ask questions and like, how does anything within this relate to any of your experiences, and how can we use that to flesh out the character even more, and not necessarily from a rewriting point of view, but just like finding little things, like little nuances that they can bring to the character. And so, depending on which character we're talking about, we had different kind of conversations about what they thought their experience was in terms of their character and their relationships to the other one. But I think that's the trick for me, is always like, making it really personal and trying to find out what they can bring from themselves.
While you were filming, did the actors improv at all, or did you mainly stick to the script and what was already developed for the characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're working in comedy and you get people like we had that are so adept at comedy, you're kind of a fool to not let them play and let them discover and rework a line if it's not quite landing for them properly, but also just jump in and just figure and create stuff on the fly. I've done a lot of work in comedy, and that's the thing I've learned, is that when we schedule our days, we always have to leave room for play. I always like to get the script because, the writer put a lot of work in it, whether it was myself or another writer, in this case, Matthew Dressel. Um, but I always want to give the actors at least one take where they can do whatever they want. Stick to the confines of the scene and what's going on in here. But we've done multiple takes. I've got at least one or two that I'm really, really happy with. Play one for you, and sometimes that will inspire another take and another take, and we'll kind of find something new, and that's keep on playing with it. But I think that's again, that's just part of the process with comedy. It's a living, breathing thing, and just like when you're watching a movie, you either laugh at something, you don't. Well, it's the same on set. Sometimes a line that on the page was really, really funny just doesn't land for whatever reason, right? It just feels weird coming out of the actor's mouth or whatever it is. So, my brain always goes, well, this is where a joke is supposed to land in the story. This one isn't working. What can we do? And so you start jamming. And my rule on set, working with actors or crew or whatever, is best idea wins. So I don't have to come up with a great line, the actor doesn't have to come up with a great line. If the boom operator has a funny idea, we'll try it, and I think in those circumstances, that's when you really start to bond as a unit, right? When your cast and your crew realize that you don't have an ego in terms of where the idea comes from, as long as it's good. My job is just to be the litmus test and the representative of the audience of deciding whether or not I think this will work. I filter it all through me and kind of decide if it fits within our realm.
Well, you were also working with the cast. What was it like creating their physicality for the roles in terms of like maybe the physical humor and more of like, was there any like action that they did or stunts, and what was that experience like as well?
Yeah, that's a good question with this one, because there is a bit more physicality in this one than I've done in some cases. I mean, sometimes it's like there's a great moment where Dax Ravina, who plays a smaller part in the movie, he has this great moment where the script just tells him to run away in the other direction. And he's just such a funny looking dude. Like, he's just got just a great body for comedy. So for that, it was just like I said, just run away as awkwardly as possible, but like don't make it look like a joke, And so we played with that a little bit. So a lot of that is just like finding their own body movements and whatnot. But and comedy too is so much about rhythm, right? So when it comes to some of the physicality, it almost becomes like a bit of a weird dance where you want certain things to happen at a time, right? There's a section, and it's in the trailer actually, so I'm not spoiling too much, where Bob Saget and Carly Chaikin are talking to each other in the background. I think the line is, how do we know Daniel's still okay? And all of a sudden, like in the background, clearly something drops, probably a body. We don't know. But for me, like, I wanted that all to happen within the same shot, and the line is like boom, boom, body hits. You got to work that out. Like whoever's on top dropping that thing, we have to know how long does it take from the time they let it go to the time it hits the ground, because I wanted it to punctuate Bob's line. So it's like boom, boom, land. So we had to figure. So then, okay, so at what point do we cue that person while Bob is still talking, so it can land right where it's supposed to do? So with comedy, it's a lot of that. It's just like, it's kind of like choreographing a dance move and having to figure out that timing to make it look so effortless, right? Because hopefully when you're watching the film, you're not thinking about how we had to like do the math on that and the science of like the body dropping and all these other things.
Besides directing the film, I saw you also edited it as well, and I wanted to ask about that process of really putting the final version of the film together as well.
Yeah, I've edited all the films that I've directed, pretty much, because that's just my background comes from editing too. That's how I started in my career as an editor, and so I'm also a writer too, not always on projects, but I find that's just part of the process. when I'm on set, I kind of have a really strong idea of how this is going to look and feel. I'm always open to new opportunities and possibilities, right? But I kind of direct with an editor's brain. I know if I'm missing a moment, I know if I still need something. And so I just find, generally speaking, when I get into the edit suite, it's faster for me to just do it myself. Because by the time I'm done shooting it, I know what the film is in my head. I know the material I've got. I know what I don't have. I know the performances that worked out exactly as I wanted. I know which ones I might have to tweak a little bit. And so I've just found personally, and this is no disrespect against any editors. There's some amazing editors that I know that I'm friends with, but for me and my style, it just works out for me to edit myself. And I also don't have an ego about material. I think the danger of some directors who want to edit is that they won't cut their stuff. Their films end up bloated and overlong. I'm the opposite. I'm brutal with the material. I'm happy to gut it if I think it's not working. In fact, it's the kind of thing where I'll have a producer come back and be like, "Hey, you cut this moment out. It's pretty good." And I'm like, "Well, it was good, but it wasn't good enough, and it was getting in the way of this or that." And so I'm merciless with the material, and I think that's why I'm able to edit my own material, where some people, it's a bit more challenging.
Yeah. And now with the film having its Canadian premiere at Toronto After Dark this week, what does that mean to you to be able to share the film at the festival as well?
Actually, we had our Canadian premiere at Sudbury last month. This is our Toronto premiere, so I just wanted to make sure that's clear. I'm so excited to screen it at Toronto After Dark. It is such a fantastic festival. I really believe that the future of independent cinema is in genre filmmaking. I think that's where the audiences are still so, rampant and excited. And I was lucky enough to screen another film at Toronto After Dark a couple years ago called James versus His Future Self. And that's not a typical like Toronto After Dark movie. It's not bloody or gory. It's like a rom-com sci-fi movie. And we were terrified. We thought they made a mistake by programming us because we're like, I don't think your audience is gonna understand why this is here. They loved it. They went crazy for it because I think it was a bit of counter programming for them. We ended up winning a bunch of awards at the festival. And so I just walked away with that feeling really, really like pumped up and jazzed about just how amazing the audience is at that festival.
Yeah. Mhm. And are there any other festivals coming up that you're bringing the film to that you can also discuss as well, or an official release?
Yeah, none that I think I can discuss. We are getting close to doing a proper release, like getting it out into theaters. So there won't be a ton of festival play at this point. We're kind of at the end of the run. We did a couple festivals overseas already. So, keep an eye out. If you missed it at Toronto After Dark this week, it's going to be in theaters before the end of this year. And then it's going to start being available on VOD at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, I think that was mainly it, but thank you again for taking the time to speak with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Karen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you again.